Well, good morning. I know people are still streaming in, and if it goes today like it did yesterday, they will be streaming in for quite some time, and that's okay. We'll take people as they come, and however you come, and whenever you come, and we're just glad you're here. Welcome to ICHE's annual conference. My name's Jeff Lewis. My wife, Melissa, and I serve on the board with ICHE. And it's a delight to welcome all of you here and those that will still be coming in. Got a couple of announcements we want to get out of the way. We've got some music we want to involve. We've got some things that you need to know about us and some questions we have because we want to know more about you. There's a lot of stuff to do this morning. And somewhere in the middle of it all, we're going to have this guy called Jim Mason get up here and talk, which actually you will really enjoy. And that'll be a great way to launch Friday. But before we bring Jim up, we do want to get some housekeeping things out of the way. One of the things that I was asked to mention that I didn't have on my list, so I got to do this first before I forget. If you are the family that has the camper in the parking lot, that's actually creating a bit of a problem for Olivet, and it's something we're not supposed to do. So we're not looking, but at some point during the course of the morning, we'll need to have that relocated. We have one of our speakers this year does the traveling RV camp thing. They set up at a KOA down the road a ways, which they posted pictures of, and so now everybody who's watching our Facebook page thinks that they can come here and swim in the lake and climb on the monkey bars and do all the things no, that's not here, that was at the campground. Sorry to disappoint some of you who saw that posting, but anyway, they don't allow that, and for, I think, reasons to do with Bourbonnais and regulations and whatnot. So we want to make sure that you're all aware of some things that we're trying to do to enhance your experience. And speaking of posting stuff online, there is an ICHE Facebook group that you all can be part of if you're into that sort of thing. There's a selfie booth. You know, if you in the lobby where you can stand at the windows and watch the swimming team practice, kind of in the corner by the restrooms, they've set up this cool display where you can take a picture and tag ICHE. I'm sorry, I'm not a tagger. I don't know how that works. But I know it's a thing you do. And it tells people where you're at, but more importantly, it tells people where we're at, which we appreciate. So thank you for that. And while we're talking about technology and phones, two things real quick. One is we have an app. I don't know if you're aware of that, but there is an app that will give you the entire schedule and all the workshop descriptions and the speaker bios and all of that good stuff. We're actually, yesterday was amazing. Yesterday was our first day, and I don't think we've had such a wonderful launch to a conference in a very, very long time. People were streaming in the doors, waiting in a long line to check in. It was really cool. I'm sorry if you were one of those. But we, got everybody through. But we're kind of running low on our printed schedule stuff because there were so many people that came the first day, which I'm not complaining about in the least. But if you prefer to go electronic, you can get on your app store and just search ICHE, and there's an ICHE app, and you don't have to pay anything, you don't have to subscribe to anything, you just use it, and it'll give you all of the details of the conference. The other thing I would mention about technology is, and most of you already know this, we do record all of the sessions, including the keynotes and all the workshops, and we do that because we know you can only be in one place at one time. So if there's conflicting things and you want to be at 3 workshops at once, I don't know how to do that, but at least you can get the audio recordings and listen to them. It helps us if people keep their devices quiet, because it's amazing how we're all used to phones ringing and things beeping, and we sort of have learned to tune that out. But when it's on a recorded audio, it's like amplified. And so just think about that and your neighbors. So if you've got a device that generally makes noise, if you could keep it silent while we're recording stuff, that's helpful. I guess I would say the same thing. If you've got a noisy husband or a noisy person in your family, be they small or large, just let them be out in the hall to be noisy rather than distracting from what's going on in the workshop. That's helpful, and we appreciate it. we want to try to set the tone for the day. And ICHE is here because we want to encourage and equip families to disciple their children for Jesus Christ. For Jesus Christ. And we know that not all of you are here for that reason. You're here to learn about homeschooling. You're here to get tools that will help you in the homeschooling journey. That's great. You are welcome, and we are glad to share as much as we can share with you. But you need to know our core is faith. And so in order to set the tone, I want to do two things. I'm going to pray, and then after I pray, I'm going to invite the Estilo family to come up, and they're going to share some music and invite you to sing along as they do that. And the words will be up on the screens. If you're not comfortable singing, that's okay. You can stand there and just look good. Y'all are actually doing a pretty good job of looking good already. Thank you. But we just want to do that because it helps all of us that are going to be up here, and hopefully all of you that are going to be around for the day. It helps us to just kind of know where we're going and why we're doing what we're doing. So with that, let me just invite God's presence and give him thanks for what we're all about today. And Father, we do that. We come before you knowing that you are here whether we invite you or not. We know that you provide whether we seek it or not. And yet, God, you have called us to come to you as your people and pray, and to lay before you the concerns of our hearts, and to give you praise for all that you do to bless us and enrich us, and the ways that you pour out your grace and mercy on us. And Father, I pray that that would be today's experience. For the speakers, for the helpers behind the scenes, the volunteers, for the Olivet staff, for our attendees, I pray that all would be experiencing your poured out grace and mercy, the richness of all that you have to offer because of Jesus. Father, we thank you for the day, and whatever it would hold, we pray that you would be with us and that we would know it. In Jesus' name, amen. And if you want to join us, you can stand, and I would invite you while you're standing, as people are coming in late through those doors, it's really hard to see where the open seats are. If you can consolidate and make the open seats more obvious, that helps the latecomers. But I'll let the Estilo family take over, and we'll sing a couple songs. Thanks, guys.
Turn into wine, open the eyes of the blind. There's no one like you, none like you. Into the darkness you shine, out of the ashes we rise. There's no one like you. Stronger, God, you are higher than
Psalms 43, verse 3 says, "Send out your light and your truth. Let them lead me. Let them bring me to your holy hill and to your dwelling."
Princes and paupers, sons and daughters, kneel at the throne of grace. Losers and winners, saints and sinners, one day will see his face, and we all bow down. Kings will surrender their crowns and worship Jesus. He is the love, unfailing love. He is the love of God. Summer and winter, the mountains and the rivers, whisper the Savior's name. Awesome and holy is a friend too lonely. Forever his love will reign, and we all bow down. Kings will surrender their crowns and worship Jesus. He is the love, unfailing love. He is the love of God. He's the light of the world and Lord of the cross. And we all bow down. Kings will surrender their crowns and worship Jesus. We will worship Jesus. We will worship Jesus. He is the love, unfailing love. He is the love of God.
One of the speakers just asked me what our dad ratio is. He said he thinks that's one of the best indicators of the health of an organization. I just came from Dads from Donuts. We had over 50 men there this morning. Just a wonderful time. Just to make the point, if you are a male biologically, and you're 18 years or older, will you just stand up a second? All men, 18 and older. Look at that. Thanks, guys. Thank you. If there were not mothers, there would be no homeschooling movement. But we want dads to lead the charge, to bless their wives, to protect their wives, and to encourage their wives as well. Folks, this is starting my 11th year. I was a young man. I was 25 when I started. Now I'm 35. My title is executive director, but I have no idea how to be an executive director. I'm just no preacher. And I approached this position as a pastor, not of a local church. This is a parachurch, should never take the place of a local church. Hope you're always plugged into a local church. But when I write articles, when I drive, I was up in Pilsen at a Latino homeschool conference a couple weeks ago. Wherever I go, my goal is to be a pastor. I love homeschooling. God has used it in our life dramatically, but as you hear, the constant theme throughout ICHE is it's Jesus Christ. And that's why I believe we've been blessed. When I started this position 11 years ago, I was told we had enough money to go 6 months to a year. And I did not know at the time, or I would not have taken this job. The donation base the year before I joined was $100. Oh, but God's good, is he not? That's 11 years ago. I'm still here, supernaturally. And we have a social media team now. We have not just Facebook, we have Instagram. We have a marketer that we've hired. We're just doing different things. I'm trying to get a podcast put together. No promises, but I'm really trying to get that to work this year. We're expanding. And the only reason we can expand is because of God's grace through you folks. We are blessed with great givers. When I started this position 11 years ago, we were funded 100% by conference. That was it. By 3 years later, we were funded 90% by donations. You can't appreciate that unless you're in nonprofit, which I've always been, nonprofit _ the non. To me, it's supernatural. That's because you folks give. And I hope you know that when you give, you're given to an organization that wants to be great stewards. We're not frivolous with our money. We're very careful. We make no money on any of our events. We usually lose money, except for the conference. That's not a lot, but it's enough to help. It's through donations. I write articles almost weekly or do videos. How many saw the Hawaiian shirt video out there? Anybody? Okay, tomorrow's Hawaiian shirt day. How many brought your Hawaiian shirts? Okay, a few of you did. Saturday is always Hawaiian shirt day at ICHE. Okay? Friday, ties. Saturday. Okay? Hang loose. Hey, on the board we have a QR code, I think. I can't see anything, but a QR code, is it up there? Okay. If you want to take a picture of that, we would ask you to lovingly consider donating to ICHE, not just once. That's great. Many of you already donated for this conference. We got 20s, we've got hundreds, we've got 1,000. We need money to continue to expand. And again, we are very, I don't know if I want to say tight, but kind of tight. Well, I'm from Southern Illinois. We're tight in Southern Illinois. And so we ask you to give. Whether it's 25, 50, 100, some have give thousands. I've had folks give 5,000, even 10,000. As God has blessed you, if you've been blessed by God, if you have been blessed by ICHE, folks, again, God chose this organization, God chose this weekend 25 years ago to do a marvelous work of grace in our family that continues today. How many of you saw my grandbaby that was here yesterday? I didn't get any money. You must have missed the ticket booth. This is my joy. I will not slow down as God permits because it's the next generation. I've launched we got about 4 still at the house. Trying to get rid of 3 of them. They just keep coming back. it's changed our lives. It's changed my legacy. And I deeply, deeply mean that. And so if you want the same blessing, also the same freedom, we work actively in Springfield, Cherry Pie Day. Many of you have been there. We work with HSLDA. You'll hear from Jim Mason in just a moment. Ad hoc committee here in Illinois. Illinois is, I think, the best state to homeschool in as far as the laws go. So that is the grace of Jesus Christ through organizations like ICHE. So no big, long appeal. I'm just saying if we've been a blessing to you, and if you want us to be a blessing to your children, your children's children, Lord willing, beyond that, will you consider giving to ICHE either on a monthly basis or one time a year? And again, you've been good. You've been good. My approach to fundraising has always been various. We don't do cute things. Nothing wrong with that. I think the biblical way is you do what God's called you to do. You make the need known. You pray, and God's people give. And that's been the anthem of the last 11 years. Thank you so much. Pray about what God would have you to do, and may He continue to bless the work of ICHE. Thank you, folks.
Thanks, Kirk. Thanks, Kirk. He's right. I was on the board when we launched a search for an executive director. And I knew in my mind, being on a board of directors, having, experience in the corporate world and so forth, we needed an administrator. We needed a detail-oriented guy who would take charge, get it all laid out, structured, organized. No. That is not Kirk Smith. Praise God, that is not Kirk Smith. Because God knew, I didn't know what we needed. God knew what we needed. And 11 years later, we still need you, brother. Thanks. It's been amazing. You know what? That's how God has worked in ICHE for 40 years. God knows what we need better than we do. You are encouraged to contribute financially if you can do that. I'm going to offer you a different way you can support ICHE this morning, which is you can be part of the team. We are growing. We are expanding, and not a lot of nonprofits are saying that these days, but we need help. I'm going to start this by saying thank you to somebody. She's not here, regrettably, but there's a woman that some of you have interacted with over the years. Most of you have never seen or heard her. Her name's Adrienne Elby. Some of you have interacted with her because she sits in our Oasis, which is the place in the vendor hall you can go and ask questions. And she just loves interacting with homeschoolers, and she knows a lot about special needs and so forth. What you may not know is she's also been our webmaster behind the scenes for several years, keeping the website of ICHE working. And she's kind of self-taught. She's figured out how to do this on her own, but she's gotten to a point in her life where she needs to step back from that. And we are so grateful for her service and the way that she has been such a big part of what ICHE is doing. It's worth publicly thanking her for that service. And so thanks for letting me do that. But that's my way of, yes. That's also my way of saying we need more help. If you know how to run websites, build websites, develop websites, we could use you. If you don't know how to do that, we could use you. What could you do for ICHE? You can do public stuff like greeting people and being a volunteer at a conference, directing traffic and helping people know where to go. You could be a support mom or dad saying, you know what, I'll be available if somebody needs a one-on-one chat, just to call somebody or email somebody who's been doing this for a little bit and can talk them off the ledge or out of the closet or out of the bathroom where they've locked themselves for the morning. You could do that. If you don't want to be somebody public and talking to people, an ICHE volunteer pushed the buttons to make the song slides advance this morning. Who could push a button? Come on. We could use your help. So there's another QR code going up on the screen, which takes you to a Google form that says, what's your name? What's your address? What could you do to help us? Or just, do you want to be part of our team? We don't ask you for money. We don't ask you for a commitment. All we're going to do is reach back out to you either by phone or by email and say, hey, you told us you were willing to help. What do you want to do? how can we use you and whatever God's gifts are that he's given you. So appreciate you being available and willing if you can do that kind of a thing for us. I need to get Jim Mason up here because that's why most of you are here. I've gotten to know Jim Mason over the years because of our affiliation with HSLDA. He is now in his second year leading HSLDA. He's an attorney, he's been a litigator, he's done a whole lot of stuff behind the scenes. He's also really good at being up front. It's pretty amazing to hear how God has used him and how now God speaks through him to challenge the homeschool world. And we are grateful that he can be here. You need to know this was not part of the conference plans when this conference started. The reason Jim is here is because Kirk Smith graciously gave up a keynote slot. And the reason Kirk Smith gave up a keynote slot was because he heard Jim Mason speak. And we agreed, Kirk, the board, all said, this is a message you need to hear. And so we invited Jim. He graciously flew out from DC and got a rough night's sleep in a local hotel like everybody else, or dorm, or wherever it was. Jim, come and share what God's laid on your heart. We're looking forward to it. Thanks for being a part, brother. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff. When I first came to work for HSLDA over 20 years ago, my family moved to a rural neighborhood in the lower Shenandoah Valley. Am I up? Yeah. There you go. Okay. So I'm going to ditch this one. Nope. Leave this one. This is a very auspicious beginning to my upfrontness. I am an accomplished upfronter. But I am undaunted. So, when I first came to work for HSLDA over 20 years ago, my family moved to a rural neighborhood in the lower Shenandoah Valley at the northernmost tip of Virginia. One Sunday, as we left the house for church, I saw a flash of dazzling blue fly across the windshield in front of us. "I think that's a bluebird," I exclaimed to Debbie and the kids. In all my life, I don't think I had ever seen a bluebird. A few days later, while chatting with my neighbor in the yard, an enormous black and white red-crested bird landed near the top of a telephone pole next to us and began drumming. Seeing the astonishment on my face, Wendell said, "That's a pileated woodpecker. That's Woody the woodpecker." Well, I was hooked, and I became known as a bird watcher. Being known as a bird watcher has had many pleasant consequences for me and for those dear to me. Birthdays and Christmas are often filled with bird-related gifts, art, ornaments, books, binoculars, and the array of possible gifts has made it easier for my family over the years to give me something they know I will appreciate. One year, Debbie and the kids gave me a large cedar nest box designed to attract cavity-dwelling woodpeckers. I dutifully leaned a ladder against the pine tree down the hill where the suet feeder hung and nailed the nest box about 12 feet off the ground. Alas, no woodpeckers came. But late in the nesting season, we noticed a pair of robin-sized birds scoping out the nest box. Rusty-colored on top and lemon yellow belly, they also had a noticeably peaked crown. After a quick bit of sleuthing, we identified them as great crested flycatchers. They're common in our area, but rarely seen because they tend to hang out in the canopy of the forest. Day after day, we'd see them, and eventually I leaned the ladder against the tree and, standing on tippy toes, opened the side door and spotted 4 lavender-splotched eggs. Watching these flycatchers became an obsession as we counted down to anticipated hatching. One Saturday near H Day, Sam and Abby, who were then about 9 and 6, called to me in great distress. "Dad, we saw a snake in the flycatcher box." Assuming my best wise old dad expression, You 50 donut dads, you know that expression. I stroked my chin, and I said in a soothing voice, I don't think that's possible. Why are you laughing? Hold on a second. Pause for laughter. That box is way too high for a snake to climb. Unappeased, they said, No, Dad, we really saw a snake in the hole. Come look. Aggravated that they didn't trust me, I said rather pedantically, Great crested flycatchers are well known for using sloughed off snake skins as nesting material, which is true. I'm sure you saw the bird dragging a snake skin into the box. Their agitation only grew, so I went down the hill and leaned the ladder against the tree to prove them wrong. When I reached my tippy toes, I clung to the tree with my left hand, leaned over to the right to open the side hatch with my right hand, and sure enough, there was a snake skin. As I pulled the snake skin out, I looked down over my right shoulder and said, See, I told you so. A snake skin. Sam and Abby's eyes, wide as saucers, were not looking at the snake skin. Pause for laughter. I'm not sure if you're laughing because it's funny or if you're just kind of cruel. Both pointed with great insistence at the entrance to the nest box, above me and to my left. From my precarious perch, leaning hard to starboard, on my tippy toes, I slowly turned my head and looked up. Projecting straight out of the entrance, inches from my head, first 1 foot, then 2 feet, then 3 feet of long black snake quivered and slithered its way straight out of the entrance. When he saw my face, he took a hard left turn, looked me square in the eyes, and flicked his tongue at my nose. Frozen in time and space, we stared each other down for what seemed like an eternity. Then Mr. Snake appeared to say, Aha, my Uber has arrived. Which was pretty good because Uber hadn't been invented yet. It was a very precocious snake. He slithered over my left ear, wrapped himself around the back of my head, then coiled himself down my motionless body to the ladder and to the ground. The astonishment of my loving children soon turned to side-splitting laughter as Mr. Snake slithered down the hill and into the woods. Then laughter turned to tears as we realized there were no more great crested flycatcher eggs. An aphorism attributed to Mark Twain goes like this: It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. Think about that for a minute. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. Like, there ain't no snakes in that there nest box. Last year was HSLDA's 40th anniversary. At times like that, it is good to take stock, to humbly question our assumptions, to ask if there are things we don't know, or in the spirit of Mr. Snake and Mark Twain, if there are things we know for sure that just ain't so. The good news is that homeschooling today is freer in America than it has ever been. Legal barriers continue to roll back as they did in Ohio and Vermont late last year. The Lord continues to bless the efforts of all of us in ways that never cease to amaze me. Homeschooling is more socially acceptable than it has ever been, as more and more homeschooled kids grow into responsible adults, take their place in society, and second and third generations begin homeschooling our grandchildren and in some cases our great-grandchildren. That the boundaries of freedom have expanded near to their outermost limits in America, with fewer and fewer states still embracing antiquated laws, is to be celebrated. There is still work to be done, but consider that 40 years ago, homeschooling was either illegal in some states, incorrectly assumed to be illegal in other states, and strongly disfavored in all the rest. We have seen the Lord's hand at work in big ways and small, in blue states and red, and in the hearts and minds of our neighbors, friends, and in many cases, in our own families. But pendulums swing, first one way and then the other. There are no guarantees that freedom, once secured, is safe forever. Because, my friends, there may still be snakes in the homeschool freedom nest box. While I do not wish to cry wolf at every turn, I also do not want to be caught unawares. I don't want to be sure of things that just ain't so. Of one day turning and unexpectedly finding myself face to face with a long black snake. The title of my speech today is From Fringe to Movement to Enduring Institution. The enormous growth of homeschooling has occurred with the Lord's blessing and guidance, and it has succeeded because homeschoolers learned the habits of liberty. We must ask ourselves, where does our liberty to homeschool come from? If your answer is that that liberty comes from the state or the elected officials we engage with every year, I want to suggest a different answer. HSLDA is a Christian organization founded by two Christian homeschooling dads, Mike Ferris and Mike Smith. HSLDA has always stood on the belief that the Bible gives parents the primary jurisdiction to raise, nurture, and educate their children, and that government restrictions that stand in the way of parents carrying out that high duty and obligation must give way. While HSLDA is motivated by our biblical worldview, we believe that all parents, whether they share our worldview or not, should enjoy the same liberty we want for ourselves and for our children. That foundation is where the habits of liberty begin. In 2018, I gave a speech at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., entitled The Civic Virtue of Private Homeschooling, in which I gave my principled reasons for opposing taxpayer-funded education savings accounts for private homeschooling. We still oppose ESAs for the same practical and principled reasons laid out in that speech. My focus today will be more about the civic virtue of private homeschooling as it relates to the historical origins of homeschooling and the growth of homeschooling, not just in the number of children being educated, but also the growth of our collective role in society and what that could mean for how we look at homeschooling in the future. So what are the habits of liberty that early homeschoolers learned that we should be careful not to forget? But first, a short quiz. Do you remember back in 1978 when Congress established the Department of Home Education? So, like Kirk, I'm only 35, so I don't remember that either. And remember when President Carter appointed the first Secretary of Home Education? You guys in Illinois, you know what? Do you learn anything anywhere? No? I mean, if not for the foresight of visionaries like Jimmy Carter, the homeschooling movement as we know it today would never have come into existence, right? And if Congress hadn't appropriated that money in 1983, Homeschool Legal Defense Association would never have been created. And without all those federal block grants that fund state groups like ICHE and local groups like yours, home education would have shriveled up and died, right? No. We all know that homeschooling did not begin as a movement because of the top-down vision of a politician, nor was it dependent on government funding. homeschooling began when a handful of moms and dads, just like you and me, said enough. And if you compared the public education system to the homeschool education system, which of the two, I ask you, has performed better since 1979, when the Department of Education was first formed? Amazingly, those first homeschoolers found each other long before Facebook groups were even a twinkle in Mark Zuckerberg's father's eye. Groping through the darkness, without email, smartphones, websites, prehistoric homeschoolers formed thousands of those quintessentially American things: private associations. The civic virtue of private associations featured centrally in Alexis de Tocqueville's Democracy in America, published between 1835 and 1840. De Tocqueville was careful to distinguish between political associations and those associations that are, quote, formed in civil life, which have an object that is in no way political. By civil life, he meant private life as differentiated from the state. Speaking of civil life, he said, "Everywhere that at the head of a new undertaking you see the government in France and a great lord in England, count on it that you will perceive an association in the United States." In America, I encountered sorts of associations of which I confess I had no idea, and I often admired the infinite art with which the inhabitants of the United States managed to fix a common goal to the efforts of many men and to get them to advance to it freely. You see, in America, unlike in Europe, homeschoolers learn to look to each other rather than to the government. And they advance goals that are important to our families, our communities, and our states and our nation by working together. In my own homeschooling life, as reflected everywhere I travel in America, the homeschooling movement has been characterized by an astounding array of private associations formed to provide cooperative classes, sports leagues, mentoring, adult support, field trips, art, books, and bees. Spelling and geography bees, to be sure. Then a few years ago, I actually came across a homeschool support group organized around bees that buzz. The strength of the modern homeschooling movement has not come from reliance on the state. Our strength has been our reliance on the Lord and on each other. And historically, when homeschoolers have come to the legislature, it has mostly been to say, "Keep your hands off." We have not typically said, "Please give us a hand out." The organic, voluntary, exponential growth of homeschoolers over the last 40 years owes much to the secret sauce of de Tocqueville's private associations. In the early days of homeschooling, opponents argued that homeschooling could not provide proper academic instruction. And then they coyly asked that question that is all too familiar to homeschoolers. On the count of three, let's all ask that question together, okay? 1, 2, 3. That's exactly what it says right here. You guys read my speech. What about socialization? Those arguments against homeschooling have lost their traction as homeschooled children have thrived and taken their place as responsible adult citizens. But we must not grow complacent. In March of 2020, a prominent Harvard law professor named Elizabeth Bartholet, and just a little bit ago we were talking about snakes. Don't know why that came to my mind just now. I'm told that Elizabeth Bartholet is a lovely woman, and I'm sure she is. Anyway, Elizabeth Bartholet proudly published a law review article arguing that homeschooling is such a bad practice in America, carried out by such a backward bunch of fundamentalist clods, that it should be presumptively banned. Not just regulated more rigorously, mind you, but banned altogether. I suspect that a la Mark Twain's aphorism, she knew for sure that her premise and her policy recommendation would be met with high praise. So much so that she planned a summit at Harvard to advance the policy. And she probably thought that she had a shot at reaching that far-flung goal. But two things happened that demonstrated that what she knew for sure just ain't so. First, homeschooled students at Harvard, alumni, parents, and dozens of academics who study education and homeschooling immediately decried not only the premise, but also the poor quality of the work in Professor Bartholet's Law Review article. Laughter again. As I wrote at the time, according to my fancy word search thingy, Professor Bartholet mentioned Homeschool Legal Defense Association 113 times in her 80-page law review article. And she made a pretty good case that HSLDA is an especially effective advocacy organization. To be fair, she casts our effectiveness in darker terms than we might. If her portrayal had been a political advertisement, we would appear in a grainy black and white photo. And as ominous bad guy music swells in the background, the sinister voiceover would say, HSLDA, brutal, extremely aggressive, extraordinarily powerful, unreasonable religious ideologues. Which is all kind of true. In what must be one of the best, or depending on your perspective, worst examples of bad timing, the Harvard Crimson magazine publicized the Good Professor's Law Review article just as public schools all across the land closed en masse because of COVID-19. In keeping with the times, the Crimson article went viral for all the wrong reasons if you were Professor Bartholet, because suddenly the whole world was homeschooling and nobody talked about banning it. While we can put the Professor Bartholet COVID skirmish in the win column for the good guys, our ideological opponents have not left the field. And they aren't likely to, as long as families choose to homeschool for religious reasons that are contrary to the values of large swaths of modern society. In a new wave of homeschool opposition post-COVID, in response to the enormous exodus from public schools, we are beginning to see more negative portrayals of homeschooling, especially Christian homeschooling, in well-written and highly produced popular publications. Last year, the Washington Post published several front-page articles under the banner Homeschool Nation, each of which cast modern homeschooling in a negative light and ended by calling for more regulation. And Prime famously streamed the docuseries Happy Shiny People, Duggar Family Secrets. The scandal involving the Duggar family and Bill Gothard was over a decade old. Yet the series had the biggest debut of any documentary series produced by Amazon Studios. Professor Bartholet was roundly criticized for her obvious stereotyping, but these new efforts post-COVID advanced the narrative by telling stories about real people rather than using a dusty old law review article that would have gone unnoticed but for the profile in the Harvard magazine. This new wave of opposition presents new challenges. But here's why it can be seen as good news. The homeschooling movement has exercised the habits of liberty now for generations, and the Lord has blessed us with more and more success than we could have imagined, often in the face of daunting opposition. The sophistication of this new wave of opposition is evidence that we have largely succeeded. Today, more than ever, parents who had their children home during months of COVID lockdowns can picture themselves keeping their children home and providing their education apart from the public schools. Because of that experience, They will likely be quicker to make the move to homeschooling more than ever before. I suspect that in part explains this new wave of scrutiny post-COVID. Thinking of the rise of homeschooling as a social movement can reveal and clarify what we've been doing these last several decades and can help us understand what's different about our job today. Social movements are typically defined as an organized effort to bring about important changes or reform in society. The abolition movement and women's suffrage are frequently cited as important social movements worthy of study. I put to you that homeschooling ought to be viewed as the single most important, positive, successful social movement of the last 50 years. In our case, the important change we have worked together towards has dramatically changed the way parents in America and around the world raise, educate, and nurture their children. Though we are still a tiny minority, we have wrested control away from the state and put education back in the hands of parents, family, and the local community. Our success, by His grace, is cause for celebration. But I wonder if it is time for us to consider that we are not so much a social movement working towards the one-time reform goal of making homeschooling legal, socially acceptable, and mainstream. We have checked that box. Perhaps we are now instead an enduring, successful institution whose purpose, in part, is to offer an antidote to many of the social ills that surround us today, for such a time as this, for this generation and the next. Yuval Levin is a scholar at the American Enterprise Institute. He's written a lot about the importance of institutions to our well-being as families, communities, and as a nation. His new book, A Time to Build, argues that many of our social ills are the result of the failure of the institutions that once bound us together. He urges that we should rebuild our institutions in a new and trustworthy way. Levin describes an institution as, quote, the durable forms of our common life. They are the frameworks and structures of what we do together. Some institutions are formal organizations like the military or university, but other institutions are, quote, durable forms of a different sort. The family is an institution. In fact, it is the first and foremost institution in society. Here's what drew me to consider that the homeschooling movement may be better understood today as an enduring institution. Quote, while institutions come in a wide range of shapes and sizes, they share two distinct elements that, broadly speaking, may be said to unite them. That they are durable is essential. Homeschooling, especially in the Christian community, I suggest, has proven to be durable in the face of opposition. Second, most important, each institution is a form of association. The institution organizes itself into a particular form, moved by a purpose, characterized by a structure, defined by an idea, and capable of certain functions. In other words, institutions are by their nature formative. This harkens back to de Tocqueville's views about the uniquely American trait of forming private associations, which can then grow into formative institutions. Healthy institutions are not simply platforms from which we shout at each other. Instead, they play a vital role in society in positively shaping the character of those they serve by encouraging and modeling virtue, which in turn encourages and models virtue to their communities. Could it be that with the Lord's help and guidance, we have already built a new institution? An institution built up around a community voluntarily associating together for a healthy purpose. An institution that can be used by Him to raise up generations who are not just liberated in the modern sense, but generations who are, in Levin's words, formed for freedom, given the tools of judgment and character to use that freedom responsibly and effectively. Christian homeschooling emerged organically, coalesced, organized, and after years of struggle, succeeded. Today, by God's grace, we are unquestionably a durable association, moved by a purpose, characterized by a structure, defined by an idea, and capable of offering real solutions to families of every tribe and tongue in these troubled times. As a mature, formative, enduring institution, called to love the Lord with all our hearts, souls, minds, and strength, Christian homeschooling is uniquely equipped in this time and place to serve and lead the culture. Little by little, the homeschooling movement grew in the face of tremendous adversity. Little by little, we built muscle, endurance, and character. Little by little, we formed Tocqueville's associations. We innovated, we branched out, and we have thrived. Little by little, homeschoolers have learned the habits of liberty, sometimes the hard way. Ladies and gentlemen, the habits of liberty are hard to learn, but they are oh so easy to forget. This conference is one example of the learned habits of liberty. The organizers at ICHE do this out of love for your families and for your children. They also play a vital role throughout the year as helpers of the homeschool community and as guardians of liberty here in Illinois. They have not forgotten the habits of liberty. Please give them all the support you can. Each of you also plays a vital role in supporting the enduring institution that homeschooling is today. As we look to the Lord for wisdom and guidance, we also ask Him to use us to model virtue to our children, our families, and our communities, and to preserve and grow homeschooling as a positive, formative institution for our nation and around the world. I began as HSLDA's litigation attorney, working directly with Mike Ferris. So my early years focused on helping families who were in court for various reasons. One of the great blessings I have had during my 23 years at HSLDA is getting to know homeschooling leaders and families all over the country. Many of them have been members of HSLDA, and one common refrain I hear is that they appreciate knowing that we've got their backs if something should happen. And because we stand together as a homeschooling movement and now as an enduring institution, many have told me how pleased they have been to know that their membership with HSLDA has helped other families during their times of need. One of the ways I look at HSLDA members is that they are a homeschooler's early warning system. One example of this is what I call "there's a new sheriff in town" syndrome. Do you have those here in Illinois? What frequently happens when a new appointee becomes superintendent of a school district, they decide, I'm going to clean up this here mess that's called homeschooling. All too often, these decisions by a new education leader to innovate causes them to demand things of homeschoolers that the law doesn't allow. When the letter hits the mailbox, HSLDA members are on the phone to us almost immediately, and more importantly, are willing to take a stand. One of the cases that we worked on recently that was an example of the new sheriff in town happened near where I live in Virginia, when a school district in Roanoke decided that they didn't like the statute that the legislature had passed several years before, and decided to adopt a local policy adding new provisions to the homeschooling law. Well, what they didn't know was when they sent their letter announcing their new policy, Kirk and Kristen Sosby lived in their school district. Kirk Sosby happened to be a Patrick Henry College graduate. He and his wife were both homeschooled growing up. And when Kirk was at Patrick Henry College, he was a classmate of our litigation attorney, my associate, Peter Kamakaviva-Ole. And then they both went to law school, and Kirk and Kristen got married and had kids. And when their oldest child turned 6 was the first year of this brand new policy. So when the letter hit Kirk Sospi's mailbox, he said, I don't think you have the authority to do this. And he wrote them a polite letter saying, I don't think you have the authority to do this. Well, the school board wrote Kirk a polite letter back saying, we don't care. If you don't do it, we're going to prosecute you. Which is when Kirk called his old buddy Peter Kamakaviva-Ole at HSLDA, and rather than allow the Sospies to be prosecuted, we sued the school district on the grounds that, the local school board doesn't have the authority to adopt homeschooling laws. That case made its way to the Supreme Court of Virginia, and during oral arguments in the midst of COVID, by conference call, strange oral argument, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Virginia asked this question. So, counselor, what will the school district do if you don't get this additional information? And the attorney for the school district said, well, I guess we'll either prosecute them or we'll turn them over to CPS for educational neglect. And the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court said, sounds like a school district that needs a bunch more needless information, not like a parent who's neglecting a child. And if you've never been at oral argument, or if you've never participated in one, there are moments when you go, ah! Even though I couldn't see anything, and they couldn't see me, I was actually in my home office with a sweatshirt, which was kind of cool in COVID times, If you are a member of HSLDA, please accept my heartfelt thanks. If you are not a member, at this conference you can join for the first time for $100, which is a $35 conference-only savings. That's for a one-year membership. And anyone here today can become a lifetime member for $1,000, which is a $500 conference-only savings. We at HSLDA know that we could not defend homeschooling families without your support. And by defending one family at a time, together we have grown from fringe to movement to enduring institution. And together we will serve and lead our nation. Because when the long black snakes appear, as they likely will, we are stronger when we stand together. Thank you.
Whenever I get the opportunity to introduce a speaker, I like to dig around for something trivial and entertaining. And this is neither trivial nor really entertaining. Lest you think that Jim Mason only speaks of freedom because he's paid to be here by HSLDA or some such thing. Before he was fighting battles in the Supreme Court of Virginia or heading the legislative department at HSLDA, he learned a thing or two about freedom as a naval officer in a little adventure called Desert Storm. Now, many of you weren't alive when that happened. Many of you weren't alive in the 1960s when the Illinois Supreme Court declared homeschooling legal, but for the next 40 or 50 years, all of the local school boards and truant officers said, we don't care what no court says, we're not going to let you do it. But our 40-year history coincides well with HSLDA's 40-year history. And so we've seen the freedom of Illinois schools grow, or Illinois homeschoolers grow, just as they've seen it across the country and now, by God's grace, around the world. There was a little adventure that happened here in Illinois in 2011. Some of you were probably there. We got word that there was a senator in Springfield wanting to implement a new bill that would require homeschoolers to register and provide a bunch of information to their local schools, much like this feller in Virginia. We called HSLDA. We tried to get the word out as best we could. In 2011 social media, which is a little bit, rough compared to 2024 social media, we got the word out. We went to Springfield for a hearing on the Senate bill where the senators would consider whether to implement this new bill that would require all of us to tell the government, we want to homeschool, and here's how we're going to do it. It was one of the largest crowds they'd had in Springfield, and the senators did something they had never done before, and I don't know that they've ever done it since. They packed as many people into a room a little smaller than this as they could for the public hearing. Then they left the grand doors at the hearing room open so that the thousands, literally thousands of homeschool families crowding the rotunda of the Springfield Capitol could hear as best they could what was going on. And the guards, the security people said, they've let us keep the doors open as long as you're quiet. Something along the lines of 4,000 or 5,000 people, men, women, and children, in a marble encased rotunda. You didn't hear a breath. Very quiet. And I'll never forget my favorite question and answer session during that hearing. And it's very easy for me to repeat verbatim. It went like this. Senator asked, if we don't have registrations and we don't know where all the homeschoolers are and who all the homeschoolers are, how will we as the Education Committee be able to help them? How do we know who they are? And the answer was this. Well, turning to a crowd of 4,000. And there weren't 4,000 in the room, but the 400 or 500 in the room went. The joke was obvious. The Senate bill was quickly withdrawn, thankfully. And many of us have forgotten that even in Illinois, where homeschool is greatly free, our legislators have a way of doing things, with or without us knowing it. And HSLDA had put their people on a plane and had gotten here to lead the charge with us in 2011. Jim, if we called you tomorrow, would you do the same? Absolutely. Absolutely. He asked me if it was okay if he gave a little commercial for HSLDA at the end of his talk. You might have missed it. Go to the booth and sign up. Sorry. If you're a grandparent here, sometimes I get questions from grandparents, how can I support my kids? Our kids, because of the age span and so forth, we homeschooled for something around, 20 years or whatever. And let's see, 20 years, $135 a year, that's, Kirk, math? Yeah. A lot? Yeah. It's at least $2,000. You can sign up for a lifetime membership for your family for $1,000. If you got an extra $1,000, grandma, grandpa laying around, sign up your kids. It'll do them a world of good. Okay, done with the commercials. Hey, before you head out to workshops, if you're new, well, it doesn't matter if you're new or old. If you have questions about homeschooling, we've got a spot in our vendor hall. It doesn't cost you a penny. It's just a little place we call the Oasis. You can come, and we have veteran homeschoolers there during the entire conference. You can ask any question you want. And if we don't know the answer, we'll get you an answer. And if the only question you have is, help, we'll pray with you. It's okay. We like doing that. Hey, kids, we got 2 scavenger hunts going during the conference. The info booth back out in the lobby there can get you the info you need to fill out the form and do the scavenger hunt. Grand prize is free tuition or admission or whatever you call it to come to our conference next year. And then there's a bunch of other stuff we're giving away too. We really hope that you enjoy your day. We really hope that you'll come back tomorrow. It's a beautiful day. Enjoy the campus. Thank you to Olivet for letting us be here. God bless you all, and thanks for being a part of our conference.